Welcome to everybody that has joined us. We are grateful to have you being part of this much anticipated Zoom talk. We are grateful to all the participants, those that are here to listen to Mr. Mashaba and all the other speakers, as well as the speakers that will be addressing our people. To make sure that we do things properly in the house of Grooming the Executive, we always welcome God. We recognize him. So I hope that everybody that is in our audience feels part of that, that narrative. We've got Pastor Reverend Tabelo Mokoma. I made a huge mistake and I need to be pardoned for that, for calling his ministry incorrectly. He will introduce himself before he preaches. Pastor Mokoma, please welcome us. Welcome God into our encounter.
Good day, beloved, and everybody that is on the call. Kena Tapelo Mokoma, Senior Pastor for Hope of Nations Ministries based in Hebron. I just want to have my opening remarks based on the scripture in Numbers chapter 11 from verse 16. It reads as follows, Numbers chapter 11 verse 16. I'll read from New Living Translation. Then the Lord said to Moses, gather me 70 men who are recognized as leaders and elders of Israel. Bring them to the tabernacle to stand there with you. I will come down and talk to you there. I will take some of the spirit that is upon you, and I will put the spirit upon them also. They will bear the burden of the people along with you, so you will not have to carry it alone. This scripture shows that mentorship is not a foreign concept to God. It shows that as much as God had given Moses the responsibility to lead the people of Israel, what the authority that was sitting upon Moses was actually a spirit, because man is a spirit that lives in a body and has a soul which controls his will and his thinking and the ability to make decisions. And here God says, gather the people who are leaders, and I want to take some of your spirit and I wanted to put it upon them. In that way, the burden of the nation does not have to be carried by an individual, but has to be carried by a group. And I believe Grooming the Executive, that's exactly where I'm led to believe that this is what you're doing, to groom people that will take the burden, right, and begin to run in their own communities, in their own localities, according to their giftings, and begin to relieve the burden that we see across all spheres of life in our nation. And I believe that the Lord will release that spirit, and it will fall upon those who are willing to stand in this space to do what needs to be done. Jehovah, we thank you for a moment like this, and we honor who you are, full of grace, a God who's ever present, who's all-knowing. Jehovah God, here's a great initiative. We put it before you in the name of Jesus. And we believe that you will take the spirit of leadership, oh God, that is so much required right now, and let it fall upon your children, oh God, so that the burden of the nation may be lessened and lessened, and we become the nation we are supposed to be. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen.
Amen. Amen. Thank you, Reverend Mokoma. You really have settled us. Ladies and gentlemen, I am not the celebrity of the moment. We've got the keynote address that is coming by a highly in-demand individual. So we are honored that he has agreed to come to us. Let me welcome everybody once more into the talk, and thank you for taking participation. Please note that all of us are muted except for the speaker of the moment, just so that there aren't any disturbances. We have scheduled just 1 hour for this talk, so already a portion of that has been taken by my intro, as well as by the welcome of God into our space. So we will have very stringent control on our time. Mr. Mashaba, who is our keynote address, is going to be talking to us regarding a topic that I know all of us find it very relevant, which is owning up to the future of our children, given the current circumstances. Need I say this? Mr. Mashaba is not here to campaign. He's not here on a political platform. He's here as a father, as a parent, just like all of us are, who is concerned about where the future of our children is looking, at the direction in which it is going. So that will be the main focus of what Mr. Mashaba will be talking to us about. We'll have a very brief session of question and answers. We've already received some questions, so I'll be directing the questions after Mr. Mashaba's talk so that he can attempt to answer to some of those that he's able to, given the time constraints. In the event that we have not covered your question, I'm making this commitment and the assurance that I will hold Mr. Mashaba to responding to the questions, and will post them on all the Grooming the Executive platforms so that you can go and check whether your question has been answered. I'm also inviting all of you to make sure that you engage Grooming the Executive through different platforms that we have. We are much active on social media as well, Facebook being the number one. Post us questions. We are going to hold as many leadership accountable and make sure that they answer questions that are pertinent to us. And we are grateful that the likes of Mr. Mashaba have honored a call, even though we are a very simple structure amongst the many that are larger than us. Mr. Mashaba, I'm going to hand over the baton to you. Our topic, as you know, is owning up to the future of our children. As Grooming the Executive, we breed a solution-driven generation, largely a business-orientated or a business mindset, just so as to contribute toward the revival of our country and its more meaningful position. I welcome you, Mr. Mashaba. I would not do justice by trying to introduce you, but in a nutshell, Mr. Mashaba is now, has just earned himself one of the caps as a founder of a new political movement in the country, but that's not the focal point. He comes as a self-made businessman who made it possible for himself when majority of Black people dared to dream under the circumstances. He emerged victorious and he became the brand that majority of us associated with. But more importantly, he's a father, and that is why this makes him quite relevant to come and talk to us about owning up to the future of our children. Mr. Mashaba, I hand over to you.
Thank you very much, Sharon. Let me first extend my deep appreciation to Reverend Mokoma for the wisdom. I think I feel spiritually empowered when one gets involved in a discussion like this, and you bring in the spirituality into it. So thank you very much for your words of wisdom. To Sharon and the family for really giving us the space to participate in this event. Not forgetting my colleague, Andre Kutse, who was responsible working with Sharon to coordinate this very important discussion on a Saturday afternoon when you're supposed to be with your families or doing shopping or being at funerals or other family commitments. So thank you very much, South Africans, for honoring this engagement so that we can find ways to deal with this very important subject that Sharon requested me to address, owning up to the future of our children. We sit in a country today that is in big trouble. We're in ICU, and who's supposed to be responsible for getting the country out of this hole? It's you and I. It is not going to be someone from outside. It is not going to be God. It's not going to be going to church. It is going to be you and I acting as one to ensure that we save this country. And I think for me, I've just really put in some few conditions for this project to really be a reality, for grooming the future executives, our kids, for them to understand that the responsibility that they carry going forward. But ultimately, the responsibility lies with us as parents to prepare our youth for the future, because if we fail them, then we fail in future generations. When you grow up as a child, and I'll take you through very briefly later on to my own upbringing on how precarious it was, but luckily I managed to survive. But I look back in reflection how many of my peers could not really make it. what are the conditions that I believe are important for us to make it and survive and really be a proud nation? I believe we need a functioning, effective democracy. We are lucky in 1994 that we achieved this peaceful transition. Something really, when I grew up, as I was growing up, I never thought possible. Never thought I would really one day see democracy in my life. And I thought the day, even if one can get the independence, it is not going to be a peaceful one. And fortunately enough, two great leaders in this country made it possible for us. Nelson Mandela and F.W. de Klerk. For me, these are two great giants of this country who made it possible for this country to achieve peaceful transition. And the reason why I would really say, give credit to these two great South Africans. If you look at Nelson Mandela, all his life, the suffering that he had to endure and coming out and really be prepared to forgive and look at the future. I think what an example. I think he provided the kind of leadership that actually the world needed. In fact, that is why Nelson Mandela received such accolades from the world, because majority of world leaders would not have taken the approach that Nelson Mandela wanted to. They would have wanted revenge, but Nelson Mandela said, no, let us look at the future. And this is obviously the fruits that you and I need to really make sure that we nurture. And let's look at F.W. de Klerk from my own perspective. We know of many leaders all over the world over the last 1,000 or 2,000 years that will stick to power up to the day when actually society gets so angry that they cut their heads and run with their heads in the middle of the street. F.W. de Klerk realized the importance of negotiations and said, look, we don't have to really collapse this country. He could have stuck to the apartheid government until we had chaos, but he had the foresight, which personally is something that I, without any doubt, unapologetic about, I will give him credit for it. And that is why I'm saying it's for us to really be able to really groom future generations. We need a functioning and effective state. We also, what I think it's important, we need stable families. Because once we have stable families, it will lead to stable societies. If you look at societies that have succeeded, they succeeded because they've got very, very strong family structures. Because family structures are the ones responsible for protecting this youth that we are talking about. Children cannot really grow up in an environment of chaos or broken families. Chances of a child that is actually planned, that is not a child that comes by mistake and it grows up in a stable family environment, has got a better chance of making than a child who does not really have a stable family environment. And obviously, as I said earlier on, once you've got a stable family environment, ultimately you have a stable society that can then assist the youth of the country to ensure that they succeed going forward. I think as a society, one of the conditions I believe we need to really be able to really groom our youth, we need education. Our focus education, for me, it's a non-negotiable core value. A nation today that can believe that they can make it without education, that nation is bound to fail. You don't have to really be a rocket scientist or anything like that. You have to understand the value of education. And what hurts me and hurts me deeply as a South African, to be known by the world to be the country with the worst educational outcomes, more especially when it comes to maths and science. What can we really do without maths and science? Not that they are the only subjects that we need. We definitely need social workers, we need lawyers, we need accountants and so forth. But I think if we are going to fail our children to provide them with the best education ever, and that is something that we failed. I look back because obviously I'm not a young man. 1976, I was in what was called then Form 3. Under Bantu education, I look at our educational outcomes today. I don't know if fellow South Africans, if you are aware that 80% of public schools in this country are dysfunctional. Dysfunctional, 80%. And we think we can groom our youth to be leaders tomorrow, to be business people, to be self-reliant. Where do we fail in them, as I said, with maths and science, with SATU being the one responsible for running education instead of government. So I think if we're not going to focus on educational revolution, our chances of succeeding are actually nil, as long as we're not going to come out with educational revolution that is going to be run by government without the control by unions of our educational structures. One other condition that I believe is very crucial is the respect for the rule of law. For a country to really make it, the rule of law is crucial. One can study successful nations, one can study the failed nations, and there's lots of them out there. Nations fail when they don't really have the rule of law. They don't respect the rule of law. But countries where the rule of law, it's actually the rule of law, those countries have got a better chance of succeeding. And you can really go out and really study those nations that have made it today. It's because they are educated nations, they respect the rule of law, they've got stable families, which have got stable societies, they've got functioning and effective democracies where citizens, because civic activism is really very important for a democracy to work. Whereas in our country today, we have a situation where society is beginning to be apathetic. Everyone says, no, it's not my problem. When something happens, you think, no, the woman gets raped or someone gets murdered or robbed, because it's not you directly, you think, no, it's not my responsibility. We forget that one day, chances of happening to you are very high, and it'll one day hit at you, and it might be late. So I think civic activism is very important for us to protect the future of our children. All of us South Africans, the 58 million or so, particularly the voting age, people of the voting age. We look at the 2019 national and provincial elections. 18.5 million South Africans stayed away from voting as compared to 17.5. The current government is not in government because of people who voted for them, because they were voted in by just under 9 million. The current government is in government today because of those who did not vote. People did not realize that by not voting, actually, you are voting. So that's something that we need to really understand. And by not voting, you are now risking the future of your children, because you are allowing your children to be governed by people that you are claiming not to really want. So it's important for people to really wake up and really be active their citizens. The other condition that I think for me it's important for us to nurture our children to succeed, we've got to teach them the value of hard work. We cannot really be in a country where our unemployment is one of the highest sustainable in the world for many years. Before COVID hit our shores, we were sitting at just over 39% unemployment rate. Just roughly 10.5 million South Africans were without jobs. Since COVID, we've already lost over 3 million South Africans. We are expecting to lose another 4 million. Now you can imagine by end of this year, chances are very, very high that South Africa is going to sit with more unemployed South Africans than employed. And you ask yourself, do you want to bring up your children in that kind of environment where you've got the breakdown of the rule of law, and majority of your citizens of the working age unemployed. I think if all one sees this to really be a recipe for disaster, then something is definitely wrong. It's important for our children to understand the value of hard work. I grew up in a small village called Haramutsi with my sisters working at Babelech industrial area, earning 3 rands a week. I respected them because every morning I saw my sisters going to work, come back in the evening. End of the week, whatever little they got paid, they'll put bread on the table. Today, majority of us, South Africans, we've got 1 or 2 or 3 family members, some of them with degrees. They've never had an opportunity to work. They are already in their late 30s. They've never had an opportunity to work with degrees. And now you can imagine now with the pandemic, COVID-19 that has hit us, our shores. So now you can imagine when you're a child growing up in an environment where your parents don't work. So you don't really know what the value of work is. Because for us, when we grew up, our parents and our sisters were working. And we used to work in the farms, like right now going towards summer. We'll go and tilt our farms and look after our cattle. Today, our children grow up not knowing whether work is necessary or not. So I think one of the conditions that I feel is not negotiable if we're serious about the grooming of future generation is for them to understand the value of work. And I think lastly, because there's so many conditions I can share with you, unfortunately we don't have time, but I think let me really deal with this one of self-belief. You know, one of the tragedies of our democratic dispensation over the last 26 years is this destruction of self-reliance. When I particularly take it from us as Black communities, when we grew up, we knew we had government which was against us. But when I look at the spirit of hard work that our people demonstrated those days, and I look at now 24, 26 years later into our democracy, where the current government is encouraging people to believe in government, to be the savior. And this is just a myth. Societies that have tried the system of reliance on government, they've all dismally failed and had a very serious consequences to their residents. I'm sure I don't have to really give you a lecture on what happened with the Russian Revolution in 1917 until their collapse in 1989. I don't have to really give you a lecture on what happened in China after the Second World War until the death of Mao, where it is still happening today. I don't have to really teach you what happened in Cuba, in all the other places where the state wanted to really be the one driving society, where the state believed that all of us are equal. Yes, absolutely, we're all equal as human beings. But can you determine the outcome? Can you really determine the outcome? Because that's really what the communists have really tried to do, to determine the outcome. Human beings that take myself and my brother, my elder brother, who after passing standard 6 those days, before I was even born, passed that standard 6, and he was the brightest kid in the region. And my father, I believe, did everything possible to get him to pursue education, and he refused, ran away from home and came here in Joburg and Pretoria. And I look at his life until, unfortunately, he's passing in 1988 through a car accident. And I look at myself, losing a father at the age of 2, being brought up in a child-headed household. When my mother was a domestic worker, when I opened my eyes to this world. There are two brothers from the same parents, equal in front of our parents, but at the end of the day, the outcome, it cannot really be the same. Any government that is going to determine the outcome of human beings, that government is bound to fail that nation. And that's South Africa right now is a clear example of the failure. And then obviously compounded by the level of corruption. But obviously all the communist system, they survive on fraud and corruption because it's about the leadership. So what I'm saying is that we need to teach our children to believe in themselves, to believe in their God-given talents, because God has given us all talents. Some of us will become entrepreneurs. Some of us will become business people. Some of us will become doctors. Some of us will become pastors in churches. Some of us will become teachers. Absolutely nothing wrong with that. Actually, that is what makes society. Because you can imagine if all of us are entrepreneurs, who is now going to be the consumer? Who's going to really look after our social challenges of society if we don't have social workers? What's going to happen to us when we don't have teachers, when we don't have judges, we don't have lawyers and accountants? But obviously, what has happened in the last 26 years of our democracy, the spirit of self-reliance was destroyed. And I'm asking and appealing to you, we need to really work hard to teach our young children to be what God created them to become. Not what you and I want. Our responsibility as parents is to give them opportunities. Send them to school if they want, they are inclined to go to school. Take them to the best schools. Give them all the opportunities. But ultimately, they are the ones to decide what they want to become. And I think this is really quite unfortunate. As I said to you, I'm 61 years old, born and raised in Amanskral. Started my business career quite the early stage of my life at the age of 22. Where I grew up believing that education is going to be my savior. Second year of my studies at the University of the North in 1980, second year of my studies, one morning, the university surrounded by the army, given 6 hours to all leave. And that became the end of my academic dream. I worked 30 months of my life for a salary, 2 companies as a dispatch clerk. Worked for Spa Pretoria for 7 months, worked for Motani Industries for 23 months. During that time, I turned 22 and I realized, Herman, you are getting old. All of a sudden, I got a wake-up call. Herman, you're running out of time. And you grew up saying you are not going to be like your community. You've got to succeed in life. And these are the things that were put under pressure by my grandfather. I meant everything to my grandfather as I was growing up. He gave me so much wisdom to want to succeed in life. He taught me not to rely on other people. He taught me to say, my son, please listen to people, but ultimately judge them what they do than what they say. So now I'm 22, I'm running out of time, I'm getting old. I decided, you know what? I'm going to go into business. Remember the apartheid days, those days, said as a black man, I couldn't go into business. And I said, my grandfather taught me, no one is going to determine my destiny. I'm going to take charge of my own personal life, whether I succeed or not, but no one is going to decide for me whether I'm going to succeed or not. I'm going to do it anyway. Not coming from a business background, family, not having the resources, having government that said you can't go into business. I had to carry pass book for me to really be able to really move around the country. Every day I left home, I had to make sure that I have my reference book with me because the police would stop you. And if not employed, chances of going to jail as a black man those days were always high. We knew you could not avoid not going to jail. But lucky I survived not being arrested, managed to navigate the system. That before obviously going into business, I decided I must be a trader, sell anything from the boot of my car. But before buying a car, I had the wisdom to stabilize my life. I got married 3rd of March, 1982. 2 months later, I resigned. 2 months later, I started my business career. And that marriage, that decision to get married at the age of 22 is one of the biggest decisions I saw treasure, because I'm still married to my wife now. We're going for 39 years March next year. And I look at the role that my wife has played in my life, and my grandfather. My grandfather, as I was growing up, giving me the wisdom, and the role that my wife protected me from myself, because it gave me the reason every day I go and work hard, go home and really have a companion. That's the reason why I believe that my success without my family would not have really been possible. So when the 27th of April 1994 came, I've already shared you the respect I've got on the two leaders that brought this miracle of the 27th of April 1994. I thought, you know what, we're going to see an explosion of the talent of South Africans, both black and white. Unfortunately, during the second term of the Thabo Mbeki, I started seeing signs that made me uncomfortable, totally uncomfortable. A typical example being the situation in Zimbabwe. Started seeing serious human rights abuses and the South African government supporting them. A country where we had massive backlog of housing and infrastructure. This country, the first thing that they did was to invest in armaments. At the time, South Africa was the darling of the world. We had absolutely no threat whatsoever. We decided to invest in armaments when our people had no homes. That's why we sit with this squatter camps, where the government decided to beautify them, call them informal settlement. These are squatter camps. Instead of building houses for our people, encourage the private sector to invest, they made the private sector an enemy because of the tripartite alliance of the unions and the so-called communists. They literally disseminated the business, particularly small business. That is why our children today believe to succeed, you've got to start becoming a politician, go through the youth structures, and that gives you access to wealth. Instead of actually teaching our children, allow the private sector, particularly SMMEs, to employ our people. You know, before 1994, in the 70s and 80s, you can also go and check this up after this session. South Africa was one of the most industrialized nations on earth. It was one of them in terms of manufacturing. We had manufactured huge factories. I'll give an example of where I grew up in Amanskral, Babelech industrial area. Paranko industrial area, where I started my business in 1994. In 1984. 1994, I started my business in Paranko industrial area. Today, going to those industrial areas, be in Kwatwa or Umtata, all over the country. We're one country in the world today with such high unemployment, with industrial areas that are lying abandoned, derelict, because the union, which is government, went out to close them down, one by one. When I grew up in the communities, people who did not work were those who did not want to work. That is why I remember when we were still school going, On Saturdays like this, my peers will be going into town and other places to go and do temporary work because businesses were short of labor. Fact. That is why over the festive season, during the school holidays, as a school going, my peers will go and work because businesses were looking for, South Africa was short of labor. Here is it, we are here 26 years into our democracy. In those communities I'm referring to, you have 80-90% unemployment rate. With factories that are lying derelict, abandoned. I was shocked actually during the week, was it on Wednesday, when government took a decision to call off a strike, asking people not to go to work because the government has failed to provide jobs. Government, the COSATU is part of government. So I've never seen something like this. This is going to go down in history. And the world would want to really learn and understand this. That how do you have a government that can call for a strike against itself? This is the South Africa we're in. South Africa where we are saying we need to take ownership of the future of our children. Where are they going to work? Where schools are they going to go to? When we are destroying our infrastructure, we are destroying our education system. And these are things that unfortunately drove me, ultimately, not to really be an armchair critic. It's been me from the time I was conceived and born on the 26th of August. I've never really believed in being a spectator. That's why I felt I'm not going anywhere, and I joined the politics, which has now resulted in me forming my own political party with like-minded South Africans committed in saving this country that it's in big, big trouble. How are we going to get out of here? Sometimes I feel we need a miracle. Absolutely, we need a miracle. The miracle that we needed in 1994 to achieve a peaceful transition. Because this time we're sitting with a country with high unemployment, as I indicated. By end of this year, we'll have more unemployed people than employed. We're in a country that by end of this year, our debt levels will be close to 80-90%. We're a country today that is declared as a junk status by rating agencies. So South Africa will not credit worthy. So for us to be able to access funding to assist us to redevelop this country, it's a process that has not begun. Unfortunately, the current government is actually still causing more damage on a daily basis. So you can imagine whoever takes over in 2024 to rebuild our country, to qualify for to get the loans from reputable financial institution. This is a project that if you're lucky or work hard, not just luck alone, you need at least 5 years. Right now, the only place we can get money as the country is from loan sharks. The only way South Africa can get money today is from loan sharks. And you can imagine going to borrow money from loan sharks, it is not cheap. And what is actually quite sad about it is that even if we go and get money from the loan sharks, these hyenas are not going to look at this money for development. They're going to look at it as an opportunity to loot even more. So we're in big trouble. And when we're in big trouble, who's in trouble? It's actually our children, the children that Sharon requested me to address. Because we and I, we are at an age where we are nearer to the grave than the future. The future of our youth, if we need to be honest with ourselves, it's at risk. But I'm still positive, despite all these challenges, that we can still really make it. If you and I can really take cognizance of the issues that I've raised. obviously not really having time, I'd like to really give you an opportunity to answer some of your questions. I can speak for the next 5 days non-stop, but unfortunately we don't really have the time at this point in time. I just really thought I use this hour or the first 40 minutes or so, just really share with you some of my views regarding how role we can play in ensuring that we can take ownership of the future of our children. It's not something that's going to happen by chance. It's going to happen if you and I can act as one to make it happen. Thank you very much for listening to me. I'm happy to take your questions.
Thank you so much, Mr. Mashaba. I'm all in awe. Thank you so much for sharing your take on the topic. It's not a very easy topic. I know that it was going to be a topic that opens up a whole lot of angles from which we may need to engage. It also is a topic that is most likely going to request multifaceted engagements. As you are saying, you and I and majority of our audiences, we are nearer to our graves. It's not a very nice dinner table topic to have, but that's a reality. At this point in time, responsible parents are starting to wonder how it is that we can prepare our children for a better tomorrow. At a certain point, I requested questions from people as they RSVP'd. I'm going to start with those questions because I got, I actually got quite a lot. We might not necessarily have to cover, might not necessarily be able to cover all of them. I'm going to start with the first one. Mr. Mashaba, a certain person asks here, they say that all the opportunities that are created are usually focused on the big metros. Are there plans that we as parents in the rural communities you could advise us to engage in so as to not await government and other big institutions for the opportunities that can be directed to rural communities?
No, I think good question, Sharon. In fact, I've already dealt with this when I was talking about South Africa in the 70s and 80s. During the apartheid days, that South Africa was one of the most advanced industrial countries in the world. We had factories throughout the country. They were not only around Johannesburg. People of Amanskral had Babylon industrial area. People of Harankua had a massive industrial area in Harankua. People of Mukwasi in the homeland systems, all the homelands. Those factories, by world standards, are what, 40, 50 years old? So by world standards, this is new infrastructure. Those factories, 90% of them are lying empty, abandoned. And this property belongs to you and I as South Africans. Now, what is happening? Why do we just see everyone coming into the city of Johannesburg? When I was the mayor of the city of Johannesburg for 3 years, the city of Johannesburg used to attract plus minus 3,000 people coming into the city on a monthly basis, looking for opportunities. And unfortunately, when they get here and arrive here in Johannesburg, looking for those opportunities, unfortunately, they discovered a nightmare. They inherited a nightmare. That's why they live in informal settlements where their dignity is completely eroded. Because you come to Johannesburg from Amanskral or from Venda, you think, you know what, I've been here in Venda or Amanskral for the last 15 years, no job opportunities. Let me go to Johannesburg, the city of gold. What is now called by this government the world-class African city, where people don't have toilets. So you can imagine you get a community to live for 10, 15 years without providing them with toilets. How do you expect a human being to live without a toilet in a city of Johannesburg, which you regard as a world-class African city? When you've got factories across the country where you can encourage the private sector to take over these factories, revitalize them and employ our people, use them as the free tax-free zones, And that's what the apartheid government did. That is what China did. There's so many models that we can really learn from. You look at, take a country like Singapore, with Lee Kuan Yew. When Lee Kuan Yew had independence in 1964, his economic environment, the threat of being surrounded by communist regimes around the world. Country same size as the city of Johannesburg. Look at it today. Look at Singapore today. Look at China under the communist, after the death of Mao Zedong, when Deng took over. Today, China in a space of 40 years, look at what they've achieved. And then while China was developing, we were busy destroying. While China was developing, we were busy destroying. And for me, this new South Africa, sometimes I feel it was a curse to us. That's sometimes how strong I feel. But as I'm saying to you as fellow South Africans, we need to do something. We need to ensure that, I think, people of Amanskral, people of Garangua, people of Mokwasi, people of Gwakwa in the Free State, let them walk to work. But government is not the one that can create opportunities for them. Government role is to give incentives for businesses to go and operate in those areas. Give them incentives, because that's how business works. Business does not work on the basis of AK-47. You can come out with your AK-47s. You can kill us. There's no way that business is going to work under coercion. Business flourish when government creates a conducive environment for them to operate. And if you are not really prepared to learn that principle, then accept the consequences. If you believe the COSATU and the Communist Party and the Tripartite Alliance is a solution, then accept the consequences. I believe we're sitting with a huge opportunity in this country to give the rural areas an opportunity for that. At the same time, we have to simultaneously ensure that we build schools in these communities. We take the best teachers to go and run schools, to be the principals of the schools. We've got to have schools inspectors to make sure that teachers go out and teach, not what nonsense that the SATU is encouraging, that they're the ones who decide who the teacher becomes. They sell jobs. Sometimes our women are exploited sexually for them to really get to positions. We know about these things, but obviously as a society, we've been taught to keep quiet, because when you raise these issues, you know you're going to be insulted, because that's how they've been taught by the Soviet Union style, is to, when someone criticizes what you do as government, what you do, insult them. And unfortunately, South Africans have been insulted, being intimidated to not speak out. And for as long as you have decided not to speak out, when you've decided that you are not going to vote, then accept the consequences. Because ultimately, eventually, this country will collapse, and we're not really far from being declared a failed state. And if South Africa becomes a failed state, I can assure you, Zimbabwe will look like a Sunday school picnic.
Thank you so much, Ntate Mashaba. I actually have got more than 15 questions, but in mindful of time, I'm going to ask you one more question, which might cover quite a few. There's also another question that has been sent on our chat, which is relevant to this question. This person asks, good or bad, history is the best teacher. Bophuthatswana used to be a working system. Education back then was one of the best. People from as far and wide as Soweto and other townships were coming to stay with their relatives so as to access the education provided by the then Bophuthatswana. Is there anything that Mr. Mashaba takes from Bophuthatswana, Given that he also received part of his education from there. That's question number one. Question number two, that's relatable to this, and maybe you have touched on it, but I feel the obligation to ask it. They say, Al Sharon, that's what they call me. Al Sharon, Mr. Mashaba, ask Mr. Mashawa how we can access some of the factories that he's talking about in the likes of Garankua, because we are from there and we are business people, but we cannot access those infrastructure. Mr. Mashawa, before you answer this question, which I make it as one, I want to make a commitment to our audience, mindful of time. Ladies and gentlemen, I've received about 15 questions from the audience. I am making this commitment. I'm going to send them to Mr. Mashaba for him to respond to each and every one of them. And I'm going to upload the response on our GTE programs platforms. Our website is www.groomingexecutive.africa. Our WhatsApp number is 082-302-6522. And our Facebook is @groomingexecutive. Check out those platforms. He is going to answer to each and every question that we have here. Mr. Mashaba, is there anything that you are taking, lessons that you are taking from Buputatswana that you think in this day and age we need to recognize and learn from in closing?
Sharon, a lot. Let me obviously address this question of these abandoned factories. In fact, Andre is waiting on me to go through the brief that I've requested him to prepare for me. I made a commitment on the 29th of August this year on the launch of Action SA that we're going to conduct a comprehensive research using one of the top universities in the country to run a study of these factories, so that when we take over power in 2024, we can then offer these factories to the private sector and give them incentives to reopen them, because they'll have to spend a lot of money to revitalize them. So we are doing that study, which will be a 2 or 3 years study. I think within the next week or so, I'll have to really go through this document to ensure that it's ready, so that before the end of the year, we can then assign one of the universities to carry out this 3-year. I think this study will take about 3 years, because these factories are across the country and massive infrastructure. And these assets belong to South Africa, they belong to you and I. There's a lot that one can learn from Buputatswana. Just talking about education, practical example, because I always believe in giving practical examples. What I learned from my father, and believe what people do than what they say. I don't know if you guys have read my book called Black Like You. I've got a friend of mine called Louis Nkotoni. Louis and I grew up like brothers. You know, Louis from Soweto only came, used to come to our village. His mother's from there. So that's how we got friends. But because of obviously the turmoil that was happening in Soweto at the time, when we went to Form 1 in 1974, we started Form 1 at the same school. 77 and 78, when we were doing Form 4 and Form 5, Louis and I stayed together. And the reason why his family sent him from Soweto to come to Buputatswana, to Amanskral, because of the stability and the seriousness of Lucas Mangope, who at the time we hated. We never couldn't, because we used to associate him with the apartheid government. And we look at Mangope, Lucas Mangope, someone I've never met in my life personally, because I grew up hating him being part of the system. But I look at it in reflection. And you can go to Amanskral, you can go to Mafikeng, go to Rustenburg, go and ask anyone who lived under Lucas Mangope as compared to the current government. They're not comparable. There was a rule of law. Mangope was committed to his people. He was a civil servant. Anyone who doubts that, talk to anyone who lived there. He was not in government to go and steal, like what we're seeing here today. So there's definitely a lot that we can learn from this homeland. Other homelands, I can't talk much about them because I didn't really live in them, because all the homelands we used to think that there's apartheid established structures. But one thing for sure is Mangope gave our people title deeds. My own sister in Temba, Mangope started a township called Manyeleti. He offered people, my sister, when she got married in the early 70s with her husband, bought a piece of land in Temba with no facilities whatsoever. No sewers network. The only thing they had when they bought the Manyeleti was water. That's all the government could afford. And I look at it, you can go there now. My sister, many years later, managed to build themselves a house. Over time, Mangope brought in infrastructure, the sewer system, the lights, electricity. We had it in the streets. You had to get an electrician to get electricity into your own home. Today, unfortunately, my sister passed on 2-3 years ago. My brother-in-law is still there. I always use the same example. I used to use this example when I was the mayor of the city of Johannesburg, with these executives which were put in as patronage, put into the jobs, not because of what they knew, because of what they knew. Did not care a damn about poor people. I used to give them example of saying, guys, we don't, as government, look at our balance sheet. We don't have money to build the houses for our people. Let us then come out with site and service stands and allow our people to build their own homes. They can have the dignity of home ownership. We're talking about land. Yes, there's a lot of land around the city of Johannesburg, but why only allow people to come to Johannesburg? Let us, obviously, I think, develop industrial areas outside. Obviously, as a municipality, you are limited in terms of what you can do. The factories I'm talking about, they belong to national government, so that we can stop people from coming into the big cities. You are not obviously completely going to stop people coming into the cities. I mean, urbanization, it's a phenomenon you can't stop, but you can develop other areas. And what I think Sharon and colleagues is concerned in closing, we need to close our borders. If we are going to allow this country to be a borderless country, then we're not a country. South Africa is a sovereign state. And to be a sovereign state, that means you've got borders. And our constitution is very, very clear around who must come into the country. We must encourage people of the world to come to South Africa. This country was built at the back of migrants. But people must come here legally. And when they're here, they must respect our laws. There's nonsense of people saying we must be a borderless country. It's nonsense. I'll be the last South African to accept that, because you are promoting anarchy, firstly. And secondly, no other country will ever accept this kind of nonsense that is being preached in South Africa. No country in the world will accept this nonsense. So I don't understand when we are saying we must be a borderless country with who? Because I can tell you, Lesotho, Swaziland, Zimbabwe will never allow you to really come into the country without that. Without a passport. You'll never go to Pakistan. In fact, you'll find it difficult even with a passport to get a visa to go into Pakistan today. But how many Pakistanis do we have in this country undocumented? So we've got to control our borders if we're serious about the development of our children, because we're opening up our country to criminal syndicates, bringing drugs, committing modern day slavery. It's not going to happen under my watch. I will raise it. I'm not government today. That is why I'm in a political field, to challenge this evil, because what is happening in this country right now, it's evil. It's beyond the breakdown of law. It is evil. I'm not going to sit back. I still have a conscience. And anyone who's prepared to call me names, you can call me anything, as long as our constitution allows us to challenge what is wrong in our societies.
Mr. Mashaba, thank you so much. I'm looking at the time. I know that you gave us just up until 12 o'clock. I'm tongue-tied because I've been listening and I want you to continue. But we are very grateful for the opportunity. Mr. Mashaba, can I put you on a spot? I am receiving questions and requests on both on the chat as well as on my personal line. For people who think that they can even suggest topics that they want you to come and address. So clearly GTE might be the go-to place to get Mr. Mashaba to talk. So can I please put you on the spot to say next time when we invite you, we're not going to have a challenge getting through to you because it seems to be the request of the people for you to come and address few concerns that they have. Maybe it's also testing whether you are the potential or not the potential. I don't know. I'm not the one to say that. So please, can I put you on the spot? But at the same time, thank you so much for allowing us the opportunity. Ladies and gentlemen, I see you. I recognize you. I appreciate you. You made it all possible. There are a few friends that I want to mention here whom I am already also, pulling together to make sure that we put Mr. Mashaba on the spot for next time. We've got the founder of Gear Changers. That's a very special lady in my life, Ms. Judy Nell, who is helping us making sure that our children can find their personal and their inner strength. Very, very solid woman, and I'm grateful to have people like that. I see all of you. I'm very, very grateful. Mr. Mashaba, next time, thank you so much for being available. We will invite you again when I have gone through all the questions that we have received. I'm going to send them to you. Please, in your hectic schedule, try to respond to them. We'll post them on different platforms that GTE has got control over. We wish you the best of luck in your endeavor in the political space. We did not invite you here as a political head. We invited you as a father, as one of the leaders. We intend to invite as many leaders to come and ventilate this topic, very critical to us as parents, owning up to the future of our children. But if anybody, it was easy to access, really, it was you. And I'm hoping that that's an indication of the kind of leader that you are going to open up to South Africa tomorrow, should they give you beyond just a mandate and give you the opportunity to get to step into the office. Good luck. Thank you, everybody. God bless you. Ntate Mokoba, you have made it possible. You have opened this for us. And I know that we don't need to close it because we're going to have another session. God bless. Thank you, everybody. Pula elinele. Ke a leboga.